Okay, recording, and we will start. So I'll press start now, allow people to start joining, and then I'll kick off. Thank you, gents. Hello, good morning and good afternoon. A very warm welcome back to all of you who've been with us through the week with Reuters Mobility. Delighted to have the first of our interactive live discussions today. The title for this is Utilising Space in Cities. The focus is around how we change travel behaviours and what that means to enable multimodal and connected mobility solutions. We're going to focus the conversation for the next hour around Europe, where there's been a lot of fantastic activity, and we've got a phenomenal group of leaders talking to you today. So to introduce the panel very quickly, we've got Meerten van Hooijdonk, who is the international product owner with ALD Move, which is part of ALD Automotive. We've got Felix Peterson, head of Europe with Spin, Mathieu de Lophem, who's the chief executive officer with Skipr, and last but not least, Verbeet, who is the senior project manager for smart and shared mobility with the city of Utrecht, and myself, Luke James, head of transportation and climate with Reuters. So we've had lots of discussions this week around a changing context for how we move around, if that's people, if that's goods, if it's access to services. We find ourselves in a transitional stage through pandemic. We've got very, very strong climate agendas which are coming front and center, obviously with COP26 just next week. And this falls into the whole equity piece, but also digital integration, policy, and the relationship between public and private. So we've got a lot to cover, but first I want to let the panelists just do a quick introduction to talk to their role and one of maybe the key missions or the key objectives you're looking at in this space right now. Meerten, I will start with you as you're front of my screen. So a very warm welcome, and please say a few words.
Well, thank you very much, Luke. So as you mentioned, my name is Meerten, work for ALD Automotive. I'm the international product owner for ALD Move, which is our B2B MaaS application. If we look at our global strategy of ALD Automotive as a group, we have 4 pillars that are the basis of our Move 2025 strategy. So the first pillar is Move for Customers. The second one is Move for Growth. We have Move for Good and Move for Performance. And the latter two, so Move for Good, is to put people and corporate responsibility at the heart of our business model. Move for Performance, or of course also to generate value. But the first two, Move to Customers, is really ties really well in with the MaaS environment. So where we look at innovation, digitalization, customization, but also flexibility. So flexibility and mobility and customer experience. And this is a huge change for us from a leasing company to a mobility provider. I think that's where we are currently. Move for Growth is, of course, to be a global leader in sustainable mobility solutions and to have an ALD Move, a MaaS application available in all major European cities by 2025.
Very good, thank you, Meerten. And I think the transition or the move that you're speaking to and you're leading with ALD is something which lots of mobility companies and sort of lease companies are all looking at. So kudos on that. Felix, and I come to you next with Spin. Please introduce yourself and say a few words.
Hi, Felix Peterson. I'm the head of Europe at Spin Mobility. I have around 20 years of experience in startups and in the mapping and mobility space. Had my own companies before. Joined 2 years ago Spin, which is part of Ford. It's a fully owned subsidiary, and we're providing mobility services in over 70 cities worldwide in 4 countries. Originally from the US. I started as a bike company, as a shared bike company, was acquired by Ford. Then we went heavily into e-scooters. Now we're kind of coming full circle and doing also bikes again, becoming multimodal, and have introduced bikes last year heavily in some markets, and we're rolling out more this year and next year. I'm running Europe. We're here in 3 countries. So we are in markets in the UK and Spain and Germany, planning to expand further. And we are building our vision around providing a new mobility layer in addition to other modes of transport in cities, around the vision of the 15-minute city that probably all of you have heard about. And this is something that we're really passionate about. We want it to become a reality, and we feel like micromobility, meaning vehicles with a small footprint, but a good sort of payload to weight ratio, if you want to define micromobility that way. And that is our mission, and that's our part of the Ford Mobility Group there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Felix. And in terms of the 15-minute city, absolutely. And it's we will come back to and look at sort of practical terms of how we reach that. So, Mathieu, over to you with Skipr. Please tell us more.
Yes, thank you, Luke. So, Skipr, we are a Belgian startup. Our mission is quite simple. We are there to support organizations in their transition to a more sustainable and flexible mobility. How do we do so? Well, we equip employees with a MaaS application that we consider a co-pilot that will show employees how to go from A to B, combining public transport, own vehicles, shared vehicles. We also equip them with a payment card dedicated to mobility. You can really see that as a meal voucher card that are quite common in lots of countries, but then dedicated to mobility. With these two elements, employees will be able to use budgets that are put at their disposal by companies for private trips or professional trips. On the other side, on the company side, we give a management platform where companies will be able to put in place their company policies to indicate who has the right to which budget to do what, etc. We are present in Belgium and in France. So yeah, we are still young, but we see that the product that we have has a huge impact on employees. So very happy with the results so far.
Thank you, Mathieu. And I think between Meerten, Felix, and Mathieu, we've got 3 mobility companies all pushing the envelope in a really powerful way. I'm going to come to Mark in a second, but just as folk are joining us, I realize if you're live, not watching on demand, there is a question and answer feature here. As you have questions you'd like me to put to the group, please put them on the chat, on the Q&A function, not the chat, and I will use that and we'll weave in where appropriate. So Mark, I'll come to you now. Mark Verbeet, Senior Project Manager with the City of Utrecht. I'd love you to talk a bit about your role, but also to give a perspective, if you would, on how you've seen the mobility and transportation landscape evolve over the past 12 to 18 months.
I will try. Thanks, Luke. I'm Mark, lead in shared and sustainable mobility in the City of Utrecht, especially doing all kinds of mobility projects, especially new mobility projects, especially for urban developments. Utrecht's a big city, almost 400,000 inhabitants, and we're expanding to an extra 100,000 within 2040. So it's all happening between the city limits. So we're doing it more intensified, more dense, and so we have set ourselves the mission for healthy urban living for everyone, and mobility comes into place when we in how to reaching that goal. We are not having the 15-minute concept, wherever a 10-minute concept in which you have all the services within your reach when setting up new urban developments. So we have a very big mission in accomplishing those goals. And the mobility landscape, of course, is changing the way in how we plan our new big urban developments, of course, also in Utrecht, when we prioritize walking, cycling, and public transport. Those are the most important ways for us when in how to make a new area reachable. So especially focusing on getting less cars in those new developments. But also you get also the case in how to how can the new people come and live there? How can they mobilize themselves? So all kinds of difficult questions in big traffic jams in Utrecht already on the bicycle lanes, adding up new ways of transport like e-cargo bikes and shared bikes and all different kinds of new mobility concepts who are really using the same infrastructure. So it's getting busy, and we need more space-efficient ways of transporting ourselves. And so just to give you guys a grasp on the challenges we face at this point.
That's fantastic, Mark. So almost you've got so much congestion on the cycle lanes now that actually that sounds like a wonderful problem to have for many sort of cities. But it's a case of actually allowing infrastructure to allow this changing behaviour and new demand. Would that be right?
Yeah, of course. Drive your bike. So we're also really expanding the infrastructure, especially for biking and walking. The most important ones, I think, when realizing the 10-minute concept of your city services level. So it's a struggle. It competes more or less the space you give to the cars and to the logistics and also all different kinds of other users of the same infrastructure, more or less. So we cannot expand the inner city. So it all competes for the same space. That's why we're really pushing and using new mobility ways. So that's also my part in introducing like MaaS concepts, new shared mobility concepts, experimental or more scaling up. So. But it's a struggle and it's a big transition. We just started.
Super, very good. Felix, I'm going to come to you next. You mentioned the concept of the 15-minute city. Marcus just said 10 minutes. So we're moving in the right direction, it seems. But I want to focus on behavioural change. You've got a long history in this space, as you've mentioned. What have you seen? How are customer demands changing? And what do you predict for the here and now and also the next 2 to 5 years?
Oh, small question. So, I mean, I think one of the things that we need to understand is that some of this change we are seeing now, both on the vehicle side, on the hardware side. So, whether that is electric bikes, whether that is e-scooters or also e-mopeds or completely new form factors like e-cargo bikes. This is something that has been accelerated by a change also in supply chain and manufacturing. A lot of these vehicles weren't possible 10 years ago. Of course, we had classic bikes, but these kind of new form factors that can really be a substitute for the car, and where between 4 or 5 different form factors you can substitute a car with the different use cases. That is something that's actually relatively new. So, for example, with the e-scooters, we're seeing them more being on almost like an innovation cycle that is almost closer to gadgets, right? To phones or to other electric products. It has nothing to do with the classic development cycles of the car industry. That means we are innovating there very quickly, and we're seeing a lot of really exciting stuff happening. Some of it might be quirky and will not find its way to the consumer. Other stuff will be exactly the form factors that people ask for. This is the hardware side, right? And then on the software side, all of a sudden, we have a connected layer, a layer of connected vehicles in the city. And everybody, has this in their pocket. Now it's blurry. I mean, what I have here, the smartphone. Everybody has a computer, a connected computer, and the vehicles we're using are connected. And in contrast to the car industry, where this takes a long time for the vehicles to actually be connected, when we roll out e-scooters or e-bikes in the city, both us, the operators, and the cities, also to data standards like MDS, understand very quickly how people use it, where they're going, where there's a lack of infrastructure, where there is also problems with safety. And I mean, this is something that sometimes gets forgotten in this debate, that this is something that 5 to 10 years ago just wasn't possible. So we're just getting a grasp of the possibilities that are just actually very, very new. And we're also solving the challenges that come with it very quickly. But of course, yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to tell you to go ahead. We're just jiving on Zoom. We'll get better, I promise.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, this is new. This is exciting and can solve a lot of problems. But of course, cities don't necessarily evolve at the same pace. So now we need to understand, what needs to happen there. Then 10 years ago, or like in the Netherlands and in Denmark. Mark, this can probably better speak to the history, but that change has started 20, 30 years ago actively in the Netherlands and Denmark, in certain European countries. But then it was all about bikes and bike lanes. Now we're talking about micro mobility lanes. We're having cargo bikes that are 2x, 3x the size, and they're supposed to substitute cars. But of course, now we need to the cities need to evolve also very, very quickly to keep pace with that level of innovation. And yeah, it's almost a software cycle type of innovation on one hand, and then the classic city planning on the other. And I think we need to bring this now together, and it's very exciting times. And it's only started 5 years ago. So I can't even imagine what we'll see in the next 2, 5 years, 10 years. We're rolling out scooters now with computer vision that is they're basically aware of their surroundings, aware of what lane is being used, is it correctly parked. And this is kind of mind-blowing stuff. And now we need to understand how we can use this, not just for the technology itself, but for really making that vision of a 10 or 15-minute city come alive, and making it actually a more livable place for people, because people are not excited about technology. They're excited about their quality of life. So now we need to really make sure that we use all this technology to make the cities better.
No, absolutely. That's a very, very good answer to a broad question. There's lots there which I'm going to tease back in. Meerten, I want to come to you next. You spoke in your opening comments around sort of the transition to ALD Automotive in your current role. How has that been looking and responding to behavioural change, and how are you helping cities in transition their mobility services?
Indeed, I think so. It's not only offering. So just to be clear, so we are focusing on the B2B market, which is quite different than the actual consumers solely from a city perspective. But if you look at what the core issue is for our customers, so that the corporate industry, for instance, it's not only about offering flexible solutions or multiple modalities, but it's also trying to find a way how to increase the usage. I mean, we've been using mobility cards alongside the company car for a lot of years, but that's only offering public transport options to people that have access to a lease car. But why, if I have a lease car, why should I use public transport if I do not have the insight of the impact of my trips? If maybe I'm not receive an incentive to do so. So you have to really push for behavioral change. You have to really look how you can actually combine company goals and personal preferences of the actual users, so that there's a common interest. And we believe that that's the only way we are able to achieve the desired mobility choices. But you also have to offer those choices. So what is the impact of my specific trip that I would like to take?
Very good. And Mathieu, I know. Well, actually, if you could confirm, so you were originally looking purely in the B2C space. Are you looking at B2B as well, or is it exclusively B2C?
Yeah. We moved completely from B2C to B2B. I think that we might discuss a bit later about business models of MaaS platforms. I'm fully aligned with what Meerten just said. I think to add to that, there are two things that are important. What you realize is that if you want to change a habit of someone, you need a carrot, so you need a reason to change, but you need also comfort and trust, especially in mobility, where when you're used to have a car, actually leaving your car behind is considered a risk. And you need to be able to have that trust and that comfort that actually you will win time, you will win money, and you will also win in comfort in doing things. I think that bouncing back to what Felix said about the change in infrastructure and the change in cities and in hardware that are coming, I think that over the last 18 months, there'll also be a change in mindset and in habits of people. COVID has had a few positives: home working, more active modes of transport that have been really positive and pushing, but we also see that there are trends that are negative. Public transport that were abandoned. We also see that because when there's traffic jams, people are used to get back in their cars again. And so in Brussels, for example, we see that traffic jams are now higher than in 2019. Why? Because people are used to get back in their cars. And so we are in a crossroad where, to come back to what Meerten said, we need to be able to shift people's habit. And now it's not that needs to happen. And we need tools we need hardware, we need cities to make it happen, because it's only combining the three that you'll give comfort, trust, and actually a carrot for people to change. I think it's a combination of the three that needs to happen in order to change behavior.
Very good. I'm going to move on to some of the challenges, but there's a question from Peter on the group, which says he understands the issue of cars in the city. However, what about the cars outside of rush hour? Do retail and culture not desperately need cars over the weekend, for example? And I know you sort of both spoken. Any immediate riposte to that, Mathieu? And I might bring the others in afterwards.
We will always need cars. It's just a pragmatic approach. Sometimes you will not be able to connect 2 points without a car, especially in rural areas or outside cities. For us, cars will always be part of the trip. The moment what we are finding is actually autosolism in cities when there are alternatives. There you do not need cars. In terms of outside of rush hours, indeed, if you look at London and Singapore, where there are taxes when you're in city, you could imagine it to be a smart tax, where actually if you enter the city between in the morning 8 and 9, you'd pay more than if you enter at 11, because then you actually smoothen traffic jams. So of course, there will still be cars during weekend when you need to go outside for your groceries, for example, even though you could use a bike, or to go to a museum outside of your city. The thing is that when can we push cars back on the road? When can we take them out? Again, to take them out, you need alternatives, you need infrastructure, and you need a carrot, and a carrot or a stick. If I drive at that hour, actually it will cost me more if I drive, but I prefer the carrot approach. If I drive a bit later, I'll have a carrot, which means that I'll receive, for example, a free public transport ticket. Great, I win something by adjusting my behavior to smoothen traffic jams in cities. That's for me the future.
Very good.
Cars
Meerten,
are not per se the problem, right?
No.
Like cars are, it's private car ownership with all the standstill, right? The car has a lot of use cases in one vehicle, and 9 out of 10 of these use cases could be done with other vehicles. But then there is this 1 or 2 use cases, you know, like Mathieu described, where actually a car has its place and it's actually necessary. The problem is private car ownership in subsidized private car ownership in cities, right? Because we're subsidizing that very, very heavily, and that leads to these issues. It's not the car per se; it's a wonderful vehicle we've learned to use for 100 years, and if you put an electric engine in, and it's fine. It's just not the right vehicle to do 8 out of 10 things that you do in your daily life, like picking up your kids or getting groceries around the corner.
I think maybe to add to that, so the car itself will especially if we look at the B2B market, it will always be there, and it will always be needed, because in a lot of cases it's probably the fastest way of moving around. As Mathieu mentioned, it gives a lot of freedom, so it's not something people are really willing to give up for now. But I do think, and that's also a trend that we see, is that people are more open to use the car in a more flexible way. So and I think by using it in a more flexible way, by changing car kilometers, by maybe even bike kilometers, you can contribute to vitality goals that you set for yourself. And with the savings you have from not using your car, you can use that bike, or you can use public transport. So it's not an addition to cost usually. And I think what we will see is currently a lot of people choose their lease car based on the 3 weeks vacation that they have, and that's why they need a bigger car than you actually would need for your commuting or for your business traveling. And I think that will change if you have other options, and that can be by car sharing, that can be by flexible mobility solutions in car, rental services or short lease services. And I think we will see a much larger change in that area, but it can only happen if you have other mobility options available to you.
No, very good, thank you, Meerten. That sort of leads on to my next question. I'm going to bring Mark back in. You spoke earlier about congested bike lanes, which is a clear sort of, I guess, physical infrastructure challenge. When we look at digital infrastructure. What challenges or obstacles or considerations are you seeing when it comes to integrating mobility and optimizing space and passage in cities?
For a starter, I think there's way too less collaboration between operators and platforms at this point. Of course, we're doing all kinds of maybe MaaS kind of projects in which we want to hand over to the traveler different means in which they can travel, of course, and be very more aware of the options that they have on shared mobility or using your private car at what moment of the day, and what's the most affordable, the most green options, etc. It's really struggling at this point to get all the stakeholders you need to really work together and not be afraid in getting your own piece of the cake instead of making the cake a little bit bigger. And that's what I really see also in our region here in the MaaS projects I do. It's very done in like silos in urban developments or even citywide, and so that's where we in Utrecht, but also in Netherlands, are also working a lot on the standardizing all the APIs you need for the MaaS integration. We put it into our permits, really trying to enforce, of course, in collaboration with market parties. So all the development is done with market parties, of course, but really helping to create more a level playing field for collaboration of all smaller companies who enter the market, not only the bigger ones, but so that's one of the main issues, I think, in digitalization. And of course, the other one is also, as Felix put out, it's a very new development we see in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe in the city. And we don't know that much of how it's being used, how it influences our planning, our policy making. We know way too less, so we're experimenting, but the data exchange between the parties is not being really, it's not in a really in a good flow, or it's very, you get data from every party delivers you the data on a different way. It's a big mess, to be very honest, and we're also really keen on how can we improve that. So if you plug in Amsterdam or in Copenhagen, you should be able to deliver it in the same way. The city can learn from it, but the cities can also learn from each other, and how to improve our policy making on new ways of mobility. So the digital landscape is a little bit of a mess, in my opinion. It's really put up in silos. So
but Mark, have you not been quite successful with the app for Utrecht? I think, is it the Geo app where have you managed to bring stakeholders into that? Has that worked well, or has it still got
yes
obstacles?
And
yeah,
we're struggling, but we are getting there. But it's really if we didn't enforce it in our permits, it wouldn't be there yet. So
right.
We as a cities also need to enforce collaboration, maybe on a certain level of working together, not enforcing us be too specific on the other hand, but you need to make up the MaaS landscape, as we put it, the ecosystem, how do you call it? And we have to put on all the public transport companies, shared mobility providers in that ecosystem, and getting them from behind their behind their borders and getting to see that there's much to be gained if you work together. So we're getting small steps, but it's not getting there as fast as I would like.
Got you. Now, I want to flip that to Mathieu, because obviously with Skipr, you're looking at an app that will hopefully do similar pieces. I know in Antwerp, there have been open access to data as well, I believe. But do you want to tell us more, and also comments from the app provider, I suppose?
So I'm fully aligned with Mark. Antwerp in Belgium, which is the example I know, has done the same. So making mandatory for companies that wanted to be present in Antwerp to actually not only open access to MaaS, but also be on the MaaS platform. So they even went a step further. They didn't say, there is kind of an equilibrium to find between what cities can impose and where free market has to go. And that's a bit, for me, the weird space when you force private actors to work together to be on the public space. But anyway, but no, it has been helping us a lot because thanks to that, extremely large international companies like the Birds of this, etc., were forced to open themselves to MaaS. And when we speak about MaaS, you have to understand there are different layers or different integration possible. You can go into the routing mode, so it's the planification. I'll know where a bird, for example, kick scooter is, and I'll integrate it in my model. What Antwerp for was to go to the ticketing aspect. So I can now unlock a bird kick scooter and pay using my professional budget without even leaving the ecosystem of Skipr. And MaaS will only open his full potential when everything will be available in ticketing in one centralized place. And that's why it's really important, and where cities and countries have a role to play into making sure that data are opened, live data, but also going further to, I need to be able to consume using MaaS application and not only see, because there again, otherwise you're forgetting the comfort part. You know, it's MaaS is a mobility as a service. That service part should not be forgotten. It's not just lumping transport modes together and showing and build a Google map. We need to go further, and that's where cities have a tremendous role to play to force, because for the moment still forcing, because operators do not want to do it by themselves, operators to give access, and then we can do our role as MaaS operators.
Very good. Felix, I want to bring you in. What's your view?
Well, two things. Like, first of all, I agree. Cities have the power to do so, and we've seen a big development in terms of how, you know, for example, tenders are structured for shared mobility over the last 2-3 years. We've just launched in Porto, for example, in Portugal, where it was a requirement to integrate with the public, you know, with the MaaS app, and including payment and ticketing. There's other, you know, other examples in Europe where that becomes a requirement. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of open and open data, and not really the expert here with MaaS, but to me, you know, turning it around and actually not being, I don't know, Mark, if you can help me here, but in the end, the question is, wouldn't it be at least philosophically the better approach to say, you know, we are sharing and opening data, even also as a city, to you know, enable other integrators to do interesting things with our data. Of course, it's always not trivial, but technically there are some solutions there. And instead of saying we are becoming, you know, an operator of a MaaS platform, including all the UI and including all the things that's, you know, private companies or private groups might actually do better. So at least on the surface, I would say, or like philosophically speaking, I would say I'd love to see this turned around and become more of an open ecosystem, right? Instead of the cities, because, you know, the comfort needs to be there. Mathieu said it. So if it doesn't work well, if the user experience is shit, then people are just not gonna use it, right? It has to be the best for the city, and not just, you know, sometimes it's a project of a single mobility department as a pet project that is really forcing a solution on people and on companies that might not be the best solution out there. So I think that's a challenge we are seeing. But generally, saying that you have to provide the data, that you have to integrate, that you have to have equity zones, that you have to have a certain pricing there. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of bargaining power coming back to the cities after this initial wave of, you know, what we've seen with Mobike and Ofo, and then what we've seen with maybe, you know, the initial launch of how some e-scooter companies behaved. That table has turned a lot now, and, you know, we've seen very advanced tenders in London, for example. We're going to see probably very good tenders next year in France, where the cities know much better what they want, and they're coming out with good regulation that makes sense. And integration and data sharing is part of it. I mean, there are some standards already, open standards like MDS out there already that you know, you can already do quite a lot with it, and there are out of the box solutions also for cities. You know, we're partnering, for example, with a company called Populous AI, where it's relatively easy for cities to plug in different data feeds and at least get an overview of all the sharing services in their city. So there are some solutions out there for sure. Other cities like the city of Lisbon, for example, that we work with closely, they've built you know, a lot of good data infrastructure themselves. We've seen different approaches, but again, 5 years ago, you wouldn't even had that data. So, you know, everyone's learning, but the cities definitely have the power in their hands these days. With the
maybe if I can add something to Felix, as he mentioned me, it's well, not our focus to tell market party A to integrate with market party B, not at all, but in the end we should have an open ecosystem. That's why we really enforcing not joining my MaaS platform or two MaaS platforms or what else, but maybe you are able to understand the language, the API which is being used. It's an open source API like the TOMP API, for instance. That's what we are really that's what we're really pushing. And as you mentioned, MDS, we're now, as an example, transforming the MDS, which will also more to a European, from a GDPR perspective, way to use what's there already to implement it within Europe, for instance, to get more like an ecosystem which provides you market parties with some clarity on what you should provide. And not provide different things to every city, because it's otherwise going to be quite a mess.
So Mark, just quickly, while you're answering that as well, there's a question that's come in. I think it's from Kang or Khang, it may be initials there, but it's sort of, I think it will tee up part of what you're talking to. And it sort of says, on a regulation aspect, what does city government need to change, which accommodates the changes? But then the second part of that was on economic aspects. Do end users pay more or less with travel options, and how this impacts city revenue? And I think that might sort of tee up part of what you were trying to talk to there.
Let's see if I understand it correctly. Because
I think the first part is saying really what can city and government do which can influence and positively accelerate the process. And the second part is then saying, in terms of actual revenue, which we'll come on to shortly, it's sort of, where does that fall for the citizen or the consumer traveling from and how will that impact city revenue?
Yeah, the last one's a hard one. Really,
I'll bring everyone to help you on the second part of that, but maybe the first part you can go to.
Maybe the first one, of course, we now we want to have more like the open ecosystem working in the end. So as like Mathieu and also Felix put in, it's really, I think it's on us to be like the director in which you want to have to set up the board and put in the pieces. And one of the pieces should be, in the end, that that all the parties will provide the data on an open by the open APIs, or they can speak the same language, in which we provide a level playing field for all the parties. And that's what we would like to enforce. It isn't there yet, but we're getting there. So that's what you can do to accelerate it. For my part, I also see other cities in the Netherlands, but also outside of the Netherlands, which leave it more open, and you get more locked in collaborations between parties, which I think doesn't add up to the ecosystem which you are about to achieve. So that's, from my opinion, from my view, how you can accelerate it in all the contracts you put in for like the new area developments, or the existing area, city area, where you contract new suppliers for new ways of mobility, and they're willing to. So they all see the benefits. In the end, they get when you're using more standardized products, but so it isn't what they have built yet. So especially smaller companies find it hard to set it up right.
No, thank you, Mark. Meerten, well, Mark spoke to sort of the MaaS API earlier.
Yep.
How are you looking at that? And also, to go back to your comments on behavioural change, what are you looking at in terms of artificial intelligence or data aggregation that can feed into that and help you serve people better?
Yeah, so I think for data digitalization, there are two aspects. Indeed, so we have there is a TOMP API, which should be the common source, and that will enable an open ecosystem for all mobility providers to connect to. But that if all mobility providers can use or can talk to the TOMP API, that makes it easier for other parties to collect all the different mobility providers in one specific MaaS application. And that brings the comfort that Mathieu spoke about, and also Felix reminded, is you need that comfort that there is something, that there is another mobility option available. And for that comfort, you cannot rely on only one party. So it's very important to have that full ecosystem available. That's one part of digitalization, to have access. Another part, and that goes to more the sustainable traveling, and therefore the behavioral change, is if you want to, from a B2B perspective, want to substitute your car kilometers, or if you want to use a last mile mobility solution, which is also a lot more common in the B2B sector these days, you will actually need personalization. So you receive the advice that makes sense for you. And to achieve this, you need AI, you need the data to help that AI to improve the travel advices. Because if I'm not willing to use a scooter, but that's the first advice I receive every day, then this application will not work for me, and I will not use it because I want to use something else. If vitality goals are important for me and I want to use a bike more often, then that should be one of my first advices to take, or my first options. And that all is the other side of digitalization and data, I assume. And that's really focusing more on the behavioral change. So,
because there's a really interesting point, and when you're looking at the B2B side, what are you guys doing, which is sort of finding routes or solutions that benefit both employer and employee? Yep. We're looking at sustainable options.
No, indeed. So that's the carrot system that there is. So you want to incentivize people that make the choices that contribute to your company goals. So what we do with ALD Move is that we make a connection between company goals and user personal preferences, and then and only then I think you're able to make that change. And the behavioral change is actually a cycle. So you have different steps. You need to be aware, you need to take action, and you learn, and probably fall back at one point. If you're used to travel by public transport and you go by car, for instance, and that shared car isn't available, then your full experience is back to zero and you start falling back in your own old habits. Same goes the other way around when you're used to the freedom of your car and you're in a fully loaded train with 30 degrees temperature outside. You think, well, and you have to stand up rather than sit down listening to your music. These aspects are really something, and that's why you also need all the data to learn from these aspects to make assumptions and to make estimates of to provide what advice. But we have to keep in mind that from a company perspective, if you want to achieve sustainability or if you want to achieve cost reduction, that's a goal. And the way your people, your employees are traveling, mobility can actually be used as a means to achieve company goals. And that's a whole different mindset of using mobility, rather than just saying, okay, you have an X amount of mobility budget and these are the cars you can choose from. That's how it has been, but it's not like that anymore.
Okay, no, it's very interesting. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. I'm conscious of time and I want to move this forward just slightly. And actually, the first question we had today is actually a nice seg to the next part we want to talk to. And I'd like to go around each of you just quickly. And the question is, in your opinion, in a single issue, what is the greatest challenge in implementing mobility as a service? Felix, I come to you first, and a single issue. What might that be, in your opinion?
I think we already covered this. I think it's data interoperability.
Data interoperability. Meerten, Mark, Mathieu, do you agree or disagree? Would you put anything else first or ahead of that?
Well, for us, I think if we look at the corporate industry, the there's quite a change in the stakeholders that we are talking to. So we are, for companies to make MaaS happen, and to make MaaS happen from a business to business perspective, you need to change your full orientation from being fleet oriented to mobility oriented, and that makes it orientated. So that makes your full view on mobility a bit, well, not only a bit, but completely different. So it's not only talking about what does a car cost, but what does mobility cost, and what kind of mobility do we have? And if you offer flexible mobility options, then what does that mean for the control and the management of that?
Very good. Mathieu or Mark, any difference of opinion? I have my own, but I'm hoping someone might say it for me.
I think that the underlying challenge is definitely connection. The B2B one is definitely the business model and the change aspect. And in the B2C one is the business model for me. So the thing is that MaaS is a very broad term. It does mean tons of things. And so identifying one challenge is very hard. I would then potentially go to Felix, because without connection and data, you have no MaaS. But then if you go a bit deeper into the different aspects, there would be other challenges and other more important ones if you go dig deeper in the different models.
So I'm going to stay with you, Mathieu, because I agree with all of it. And it is encompassing. But in terms of the business case, we've been scratching our heads, and there's been some brilliant ideas, but no one has quite got that silver bullet. Now, I'm not looking for you to solve the business case for mobility as a service on this call right now. But if you had suggestions or ideas, stuff that you're about that you think could work, and to try and get a gauge from the others on the call, what might that be?
I think that, again, there is a distinction between B2C MaaS and B2B MaaS. B2B MaaS are paid by companies. Why they are paid by companies? Because it gives them either economies, or it gets them to their goals in terms of sustainability, or it improves their employer branding, or it gives flexibility to their employees that they need. So there is a big advantage for companies to pay for MaaS. B2C, for me, and coming from the B2C world, there is no business model. It has to be, according to me, subsidized by cities and by the public authorities. Why? Because the aim is very different. And Mark can maybe confirm or not afterwards, but for me, B2C MaaS has an aim of universality, enabling everyone to be able to use any type of vehicle according to their particular need of the moment, is what B2C MaaS is for me, pushing towards more sustainable means. The problem is that end users will not pay for it. They will only use it if we offer it to them, comfort and trust, as we've always said. So there, and having tried it, we've very quickly realized that there was no business model. It's an investment that can be actually reimbursed by all the money that cities and countries are paying for traffic jams. I don't know if you know, but it's between 2 and 4% of the GDP that's invested yearly on traffic jams. So only in Belgium, it's between 4 and 8 billion a year. So there are ways of getting that money back, but it's not through a business model. It's through subsidy and then less cost, according to me at least.
Actually, that's a great rhetoric, I should say. It's getting quite interesting, juicy maybe. Mark, what do you think, and do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, a lot has been said already. I agree with the connection and all the struggles we have in connecting everything you need for the customer to have a seamless journey. Also like the business model for the B2C focus, which also has a Utrecht. I agree totally with Mathieu. It's really difficult to what we also see is that the customers don't really want to pay extra. So it has to become where you have your business from maybe connecting different kind of shared mobilities or a kickback fee from the means of transport in the end. But so that's what comes to my point. It's really about the way the contractors between the platform operators and the fleet operators, how they collaborate, and the business model in which you have the contract alongside the technical integration of the TOMP API, for instance, or other APIs. There's going to be a whole discussion on commercial legal aspects, and which in my experience from the last 2 years takes a little bit more even than the technical integration, because all the especially fleet operators are looking for, well, MaaS has to prove itself, so why should I pay anything for a connection? And on the other hand, well, the MaaS developer needs to get some profits from something. So and they have to, well, set up their client base. So it's that's really the struggle for what will be the business case for MaaS. And I agree with Mathieu from the long end in reaching public goals, which is the golden egg for MaaS maybe in the long road. And maybe you should be, as a government, be able to or dare to maybe subsidize some kind of trips in which you see as publicly beneficiary or something. So yeah, something like that.
No, I think it's a good answer. Felix, you mentioned interoperable data. Now that's obviously sort of connected with business models and revenue opportunities. What are you seeing? Can you maybe embellish on that answer for us?
Well, I want to bring maybe another and maybe a bit controversial aspect to this. I mean,
please do.
If we take a step back, like Mathieu said, MaaS, what is that? And it's a huge, it's a big complex. But a lot of times we're discussing it from a sort of a seamlessness for the user, right? So that the goal is that there is a complete seamlessness, there's an integration into one app. I think the bigger hurdles right now are different ones. It's not the seamlessness of the UI, which is very, very hard to achieve because you actually need everyone to agree on standards, and there are legal issues, handover issues, all these things. There is already a pretty good platform that we all have in our pockets. It's called the phone. And while it's not ideal that I have 2-3 apps, honestly, I can live with it. If we talk to users or we see, what is hindering adoption of new modes in cities, it's the price. But that is something that can still be solved if I choose as a city 1 or 2 shared bicycle operators, and I already put a budget, for example, aside for a docked scheme, right? That cities are subsidizing in large ways. I might as well subsidize the dockless scheme to get the price low and just force the company to say you need to have a monthly pass, or you should not have a higher price than X. And we see exactly the difference between very high priced private companies with usage of like 1 or twice a day, and then highly subsidized dock schemes of bikes in cities with a usage of 10 times a day. And the user will combine it with public transport. They're not stupid. I mean, they know that, I can take this to the subway and then I can change to the subway. It's normally a matter of price, and it's a matter of infrastructure. I think we're over indexing this, it's a bit of a technological Silicon Valley way of looking at it. Like once I have this completely integrated seamless app that is super UI and everything, people will just in masses drop their cars and start using other things. They're already out there. So it's a matter of price. Actually, the availability through an app with a credit card on my phone, yes, there are fringe problems where people don't have credit cards and things like that, but you can solve this as well. It's actually, the usability of these services is very high already. I don't think that that's the issue. In the B2B space, that's a different story, because you have very high incentives, to have car fleets and making that mind shade from fleet management to mobility management. I think that's true. But in cities, if you want a cheap bike service already as a city today, you can have it. You just need to shift some subsidies, and then you need to pick the right operators, and you need to lay the ground rules. And then if you have that service, people will use it. And that's a fact. We see this today in the usage data.
I think it's a great answer. We're seeing it in London every day as more and stuff is on the streets. I think once we go sort of all the way around on back to B2B, Meerten, when we look at that, you've spoken to behavioural change, you've spoken to the multi-stakeholders involved in making it happen. What's your view on the business model and next steps?
So if I hook in on what Mathieu said, mentioned with a B2B business model for MaaS is easier, I would say, than it is for a B2C market. It's exactly what we've learned with maybe car sharing projects. I mean, if you have a car sharing project from a B2B perspective, you can have a pool of cars available at the location or at an office location, and employees can use it, but those cars are being paid for on a monthly fee. If you want to have a free floating car sharing model, those cars aren't being paid for with a monthly fee. They're just being paid for by actual usage, and then the usage must be quite a lot. And if we look at the way cars are being used, I mean, 90%, maybe a bit more of the time, they are not they're actually not being used. And for car sharing, of course, that's not 90%, but it's still not 100% that they are being used, and that makes it a bit more difficult. For MaaS, I think we need both. To make a B2B MaaS solution successful, you need to have all the availabilities or all the options available to you, and that's only possible if there's a B2C market as well, because that all relies on having the access, having the comfort of being able to use it. So yeah, I think it's a combination of both, and I think it's something in the Netherlands we are trying with the MaaS pilots in to also see what will actually work. But yeah, having a B2C solution without support from the cities is not going to happen. You need the cities also for the infrastructure, and the other way around, the B2B cannot work if there's not enough availability, and for that you need the cities, you need the consumers as well.
No, I think it's a very good answer. We have covered an awful lot of ground in the past 55 minutes, and we're rapidly approaching time. There's lots we could dig into more. I think it would be remiss not to put a question back to sort of the concept of cities and space, and also in a climate context. We know there's a big meeting over the next couple of weeks in Glasgow, and I'd love just to hear almost a summary of this, but also what that means for climate considerations and what maybe we think we can take from this to maybe help the cities move towards those goals. Mark, I'll start with you. And look, this is not solve climate change in 30 seconds. This is almost a how we think city space movement between public and private can help on that journey.
Yeah, of course, in the long end, all what I do in this mobility projects, I want to help the climate a little bit more, or to reaching our climate goals, of course, but also create more livability in our cities, using up all the space cars take up nowadays. As Meerten puts out, they're using lots of space also in Utrecht without being used that much. Now, I think we should be focusing more in getting the use of new mobility options. They have lots of potential. We're now focusing a lot on MaaS, the digital platform, but MaaS is nothing without the hardware on the streets. So we have to provide as a municipality, but also as a regional government, I think we have to be more on the active seat on providing, maybe pushing out more means of mobility next to the car, more alternatives, better alternatives, together with market parties, of course, maybe some subsidized, some not. So that's from my part, and MaaS could help to accelerate that. So, and make it a more seamless journey for the consumer. But I totally agree that we have to support this movement as our government and cannot sit and relax. So
very good. Felix, I'm going to come to you next in terms of the role of micromobility and how that can help both cities and regions solve and help the climate issue.
Well, I mean, mobility or traffic is a large part of a city footprint. So if a city sets itself CO2 goals and wants to reach them, solving inner city mobility is a large part of it. Probably the largest, together with maybe construction, but it plays a huge role. So it needs to be solved, right? If you want to reach the CO2 climate goals, and that's something that cities are already doing and seeing. The other part for me is the overall livability and the quality of life in the city, which is something that people will see very immediately. So we can put a positive spiral into place where we don't just have to say you're doing this here and you're basically almost need to forgo something and have less quality of life to save the global climate. No, it's the contrary. This will actually be a very short-term positive impact for people that will be very surprised in how much better their city is, and that also helps the climate in a big way.
Very good. Mathieu, you said earlier there will always be cars, and I think that's a really candid and honest approach. What is Skipr doing in helping this transition?
So as I already mentioned a few times, Skipr is really trying to give comfort and trust to be able to leave your car behind, or actually to only use it when it's needed. And I think that if we come to the city level, there is sustainability, but we do not live in a limitless world. There's also an economical consideration that needs to happen. For me, the moment cities find the right way of putting the use of micromobility through the use of digital tool in the hands of their citizens, they will first of all limit cars, hence limit pollution, but they will also win money. And by winning money, you will actually be able maybe to offset the rest of the emissions or continue to transform infrastructure. So for me, the aim is now to get into that virtuous circle of use will improve the city, that will then improve the use, improve the city, and then you'll get in a pattern where actually cities will become one of the main vectors of sustainable mobility, hence reducing their own emissions as well.
Very good. Cities as a vector of sustainability is a great quote. Meerten, how are ALD helping, I guess, businesses in their approach to hit targets?
Yeah. So if we look mainly at if we look at the sustainability goals, a very quick way of reaching those goals is to look at electrifying your fleet, but that's only focusing on the people that are entitled to a company car. And that's not helping the commuting or business traveling that happens with private cars or rental cars or pool fleet cars or whatever. So for that, you would still need some form of flexible mobility options. And there are a lot of people, especially younger people, and this comes also to employer branding, as what Mathieu also mentioned, is if you want to attract new talent, a lot of those young talented professionals, they live in an urban area and they work in an urban area, and that they probably do not have a car. They will most likely not have a parking permit available. Mark mentioned to expect another 100,000 people in the coming years in the same city area. They cannot all 100,000 have a car. That's not going to happen. So for those people, you need something else to you need to offer them a sustainable mobility option, which can be an e-scooter, an e-bike, a bike, walking, all those options.
Very good. We've got a lot of ground, digital infrastructure, parts of safety. We could go into a lot more, business models around MaaS, frameworks, and I guess next steps from both public and private. That is all we have time for now. Thank you to those watching live and also to many more on demand. A big thank you to the panel, to Meerten, to Mathieu, to Felix, and to Mark. Thank you for speaking to Reuters, and we look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.